Hello.
Hey, everybody. So much agreement today. I heard a lot of agreement. Commissioner Gort, you asked for a compromise. Playhouse Foundation's got it. Mr. Adler and all his fans get a home for him to make his award, Carbonell Award-winning theater. They get it right away. That's a compromise. The parking garage can happen. The money can be there. We've got literally
state her name?
A fundraiser.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Oh, sorry, Carmen Peláez.
Thank you very much.
I'm famous in my own head, so sometimes I forget I'm not actually famous. We literally have an expert in raising money that's raised hundreds of millions of dollars that can do this for us. Today we decide if we are a city of standards, if we respect our laws, or if we're gonna be backwater. I hate to put it that way, you guys, but that's what I'm hearing. TCG comes next month. Thousands of theater makers come next month. All of my friends have asked me already to take them to the Playhouse. For those of you that don't care about theatrical history, you don't think art matters, I got one word for you, azúcar. Everybody knows that's Celia Cruz and everybody knows that's Cuba. Art matters. Luis Santero had his plays at Coconut Grove Playhouse. I told my family's story of exile from that stage, and I took it to New York and Los Angeles because on my resume it said Coconut Grove Playhouse, because every important 20th century artist of color and Anglo and Hispanic and Asian worked there. They did diversity before it was a thing. The foundation is offering a public-private partnership. Investment equals accountability. Nobody wants free money. I want to hold people accountable. I want to participate. And I'm sorry, if a 300-seat theater that works half the year is going to bring so much investment, it's going to work so well, let's add a few more seats in. That's more restaurants, more gift shops. When I was in that theater, I stayed there, I lived there. It was magical. Buses came in, restaurants were full. People got to hear a theater in their language. They deserve that. Mike gets in his experience, Heisenbattle's experience. Your HEP board is brilliant. I've seen them argue for an hour and a half about a potted plant in front of a house. They have standards, as well they should. Commissioner, everybody should have standards. If we were gonna get on a plane right now and the mechanic said, well, we got 5 out of the 6 checklist things that aren't quite working, but we think it's gonna be okay, let's just take off, let's just take off.
They said it on my
Nobody would take off.
They said it on my last plane ride.
Okay.
We took off.
I would have gotten off because my dad was a pilot. If the mechanic doesn't say 6 out of 6, we're ready to go, I'm not taking off. Why do we have to take off? There's compromise, there's money, there's goodwill. Coconut Grove Playhouse was the most important artistic institution in Miami before the arts got here, before Art Basel and everything. Nobody said Miami could be an artistic city. You guys have the opportunity to say we are on a global stage, we are international, we will not go back. Past is prologue. We can do this porque somos Miami.
Thank you very much.
Porque somos Cubano, Bahamian, Haitian, Anglo, Japanese, Black, White. And we need a stage for everybody, for Grove Stage, for all the brilliant Cuban theater that's happening that every time I go is sold out. And I'm sorry, if you say your theater doesn't sell seats, you're not programming right. We can do this.
Thank you.
We can do this, commissioners. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. We can do this.
Ms. Peláez, you are a great actress.
No, but you know what? I don't have to act when I'm telling the truth, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
You are a great actress.
Thank you. Hold your applause, please. Thank you.
My name is Rick Gonzalez, and I happen to be an expert in Florida historic preservation. And I also grew up on 17th Avenue, right down the street. So I'm here for many reasons. I'm also on the Florida Historical Commission. I am the architect that reviews all the National Register listings before they go up to Washington, D.C. I've been doing that for 10 years as a volunteer. I'm an architect, 30 years with REG Architects in West Palm Beach, Florida, my headquarters. I'm also the past president of the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. We had our conference here 5 years ago in the city of Miami, one of the best conferences that we had. Thank you for that opportunity back then. And I also have 2 blogs with over 1,500 followers on issues that affect Florida historic preservation and Florida historic places, like the Coconut Grove Playhouse. The HEP Board of the City of Miami did their job on March of 2019. Competent and substantial evidence was presented at that hearing. Arguments were made from both sides. That board did not say that they wanted to demolish this building and keep the southern facade and the eastern facade. They said, we want to save and resalvage and reuse this wonderful historic building. The SHPO, with whom I work with, Mr. Tim Parsons, sent a letter, an email in 2017, November. I have copies. And also an email this past couple of months where 7 of the 10 standards of the Secretary of the Exterior were violated by this proposal that the county is putting forward to you today. You're at a crossroads. You can either be known as the people that decided to save this beautiful building so that when it does have 100 years of history behind it, and I can visualize that celebration, I'd love to come down to it, people can say, this commission saved that building. I urge you to save this building. And I'm here to answer any questions if you need me to.
And just to clarify, tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
Rick Gonzalez.
Rick Gonzalez. You are currently with the Florida Department of State, or you were with the Department of State?
I have my own firm in West Palm Beach, and then I volunteer as a historic commissioner on the Florida Historical Commission. And I'm also the architect on the National Review Board. We review all the applications.
You review the applications as the state recommends to the National Register.
Correct. We have to, before they go up to Washington, Tallahassee has to do a review of each building that comes from the state of Florida.
Thank you. If you don't mind sticking around, there may be some questions for you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Mr. Heisenbottle has the donation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The point of Bob is that the foundation has already engaged Bob to begin this sort of work, and that Bob has a track record, an amazing track record of fundraising. The point of all that is the city of Miami should never come out of its pocket for $1 to support this theater. This should be done on, the taxpayers have already given enough. This should be done with private sector money, and it's possible, and we got the team built to do it. That aside, commissioners, Mr. Mayor, my name is Rich Heisenbottle, and I'm president of R.J. Heisenbottle Architects with offices at 2199 Ponce de Leon Boulevard in Coral Gables, Florida. Many of you know that I provided expert testimony before this commission on numerous occasions in the past, and that I served as Commissioner Gort's appointment to your Preservation Board for over 10 years. Today, I again submitted my resume to the clerk as an expert and had asked the chair if he would graciously give me a little more time. I think we're okay time-wise. As an expert in historic preservation matters, along with my colleague, Rick Gonzalez, who spoke earlier, and Arva Moore Parks, the renowned historian, both of whom spoke earlier, provided clear and competent testimony and evidence to your HEP Board that your HEP Board did not err in denying the county's application for a certificate of appropriateness. They did not err because beyond the shadow of a doubt, they heard clear and competent testimony, the same clear and competent testimony that you've heard and that you're hearing now, that the county's plan does not meet the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines for the restoration and rehabilitation of historic structures. This testimony is the legal criteria required for all approval of a COA under Chapter 23 of the City of Miami Code. It's not whether we like 300-seat theaters or 700-seat theaters or whether he's nicer than he is. It always comes down in preservation law to whether or not you meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. That was the charge of your Preservation Board, and that is your charge today. Commissioners, this is a very special day. Today, each of you has the opportunity to change the course of history, to save the Coconut Grove Theater. You have the opportunity to right a wrong that has been perpetuated throughout the city of Miami by a well-intentioned but gravely mistaken representatives of Miami-Dade County and their professional consultants. That wrong, that misrepresentation, is that the county plan for the Playhouse is somehow a restoration project. Nothing could be further from the truth. That the Playhouse remained shuttered for so long, we all know and would probably agree is civically indefensible In 2004, county residents envisioned the theater's glorious rebirth when we voted for the reconstruction of the Coconut Grove Playhouse to restore its structural integrity and add to the performance and educational capabilities. But sadly, for its own convenience perhaps, Miami-Dade County chose to undertake a massive demolition and new construction project, a garage, retail, and office development with an ancillary 300-seat theater cloaked in the misrepresentation that this is somehow a historic preservation project. Why the county proceeded in that manner, I'm not sure. But when the project was first submitted to the state of Florida for a special category preservation grant and deemed ineligible by the state historic preservation officer, Mr. Spring certainly should have known that he was doing something improper. Jim Parsons, the director of the Division of Historic Resources in the state of Florida, the historic preservation officer, made it abundantly clear. In November 2017, he wrote Mr. Spring and advised that, quote, this project, as presented in the application and associated attachments, including the architectural drawings, does not conform to the Secretary of the Interior standards, and if carried out as proposed, it would not comply with the following standards for rehabilitation. Standards 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 10. Heck, that's nearly all of them. Rather than respond to Tim Parsons by revising the plan to conform to the standards, which is what we all normally do, it happens to me as well, the county continued to proceed with the same concept and try to move heaven and earth to justify this demolition plan. They will tell you that the exceptional architectural, artistic, cultural, and historic importance is gone, and that what was originally, or of this latest iteration, 1,130-seat theater should be torn down and replaced by a new 300-seat theater. This is the, excuse the word, arrogance that has resulted in a second letter from the state of Florida to your historic preservation officer, Warren Adams, on March 1st, 2019. A year later, Tim and his staff have to repeat themselves again and restate that the revised plans, again, fail to meet the Secretary's standards. And then, in a show of continued arrogance, instead of returning to the HEP Board, which is what everyone else in the city of Miami does when they have a problem, we decide we're going to come to the commission and ask the city commission for an appeal. We're going to try to override the HEP Board. I think that's certainly very, very unfortunate. The Playhouse still possesses the integrity of design, setting, and workmanship, and it still has major significance in the city of Miami's historic, cultural, aesthetic, and architectural heritage. By the way, copies of the memo from the State Historic Preservation Office, the highest preservation officer in the state of Florida, with an amazing staff of very competent preservation architects and scholars. Those memos and the letter are in your packet today and should be considered a permanent record of why this does not meet standards. The entire Keenan and Elliott Auditorium is restorable within the guidelines of the U.S. Secretary of the Interior standards for the rehabilitation of structures and should be eligible for state and federal grant funding. So what can this commission do to make a difference? What can you do to change the course of history? Well, you have three options, but let's talk only about two. You can tell the county to go back to the HEP Board when you have your plans that meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. I don't personally recommend that. Or, as I do recommend, you can offer a compromise COA that will meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, allow the county and FIU to proceed with the construction of the new garage and the front liner building, allow the county to proceed to restore the front facade of the Playhouse in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards and as directed by your very competent historic preservation officer. Allow the county to proceed with construction of a 200-seat theater for Gable Stage, who after all this time certainly deserves their theater. But that 200-seat studio theater, the size theater they originally expected to get, should be situated on the property adjacent to the historic theater. You can suggest that the county embrace a public-private partnership with the Playhouse Foundation and the Bohemian surrounding community and allow them to raise the funds necessary to restore the historic main stage Playhouse Theater as a multicultural Broadway of the South that it deserves to be. In this compromise, everyone in this room gets what they want. The Playhouse Foundation and the Bohemian community have a plan that truly meets the requirements of the Secretary of the Interior standards and one that restores the Playhouse structural integrity and adds to its performance and educational capabilities. One that will allow the state of Florida and federal funding opportunities to go forward. A plan that also embraces all segments of our community, not just one. This is what the public voted for in 2004 when they approved that bond issue. Are you brave enough to change the course of history today, gentlemen? To tell Miami-Dade County what to do? Because in my opinion, that is your charge. Be sure that it meets the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Thank you.
The legacy of the Playhouse, the heart and soul of Coconut Grove, needs to continue. Most certainly not as a 300-seat theater with an old facade in the midst of a retail and office development, but as a restored historic theater, continuing in its legacy of theatrical and artistic excellence.
Thank you, Mr. Heisenbottom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please hold your applause. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Edson, and I'm an attorney in Coral Gables at Colson, Hicks, and Edson. I live at 501, apartment 501 Park Grove, condominium, about 3 blocks from here. And I've been living in this area for about 45 years. And I'm very proud to call Miami my home. And about 25 years ago, I got involved in arts administration. And I have been working in that ever since. It's a vocation. It's what I like to do. I love working with artists. I like giving back to the community that's been so good to me. I have been fortunate to be very successful here. And I have founded an organization called the Coconut Grove Playhouse Foundation, which is what people have been talking about when they say the foundation, to study whether or not it's feasible to return an important national theater here to Coconut Grove in the Coconut Grove Playhouse. And we've concluded after doing 5 years of study, including a report that was done by AMS Planning and Research, a national theater, if you have a 700-seat theater properly managed, it will be successful. We had somebody up here just a minute ago talking about what it was like at Coconut Grove Playhouse. It wasn't managed right. That's why I went out of business. There are great regional theaters all over the country that do very, very well. We've studied those, and they're in places that have great performing arts centers like the Arts Center. I was the chairman of the board and the president of the Miami City Ballet for 9 years. After that, I served 5 years as the chairman of the Avian Arts Center. I've been in an executive position there for 10 years. I started there practically from the beginning of that. If you recall, people said theater won't work down there. The Arts Center won't be successful. And I think we're one of the finest performing arts centers in the country today. The ballet is now the 4th largest and most successful ballet company in this country and among the top 10 in the country. And I've talked about that because I've heard so much today about why great theater won't work here, why a great national theater like we've had for decades won't work. And I'm here to tell you that we've studied this from coast to coast. I've been to 15 cities. I've talked to people from the East Coast to the West Coast to London to study their business plans. And we have got our business plan in the PowerPoint I was going to show you, and we will absolutely be successful if we restart great theater here again. We need to preserve this building. And I want to tell you a minute about the business plan, about the 3 parts of what we want to do to Coconut Grove Playhouse, what we would like to do if we had an opportunity. First of all, we're asking for a public-private partnership. We believe that's the way that this should be. It should be run with private sector money invested in it. This is different than the Performing Arts Center. Performing Arts Center is a roadhouse. This here is a creative space. This is a space for everybody in this community. It's not just for District 2. It's for every single district sitting up here. And it will create jobs and income and opportunity for children, young people, and adults to come down here and be entertained and to learn about theater, learn about music, learn about all the arts. We have 3 buildings involved here. First, we are going to we suggested restoring the Coconut Grove Playhouse completely and modernizing that and bringing it back to its 1925 condition. About 20 years ago, there was a building next door to a property I owned in Coral Gables called, it's now Books and Books. Most of you probably know that building. That's a 1923 building. That building was scheduled to be demolished. I came in there and saved the building and built an office building next to it because I believe in preservation. That's now, I think, one of the most exciting places in Coral Gables. And that's an example of what preservation is all about. That could have been torn down. It wasn't considered important, but we got the original plans and we rebuilt it. We can do that with the Coconut Grove Playhouse. The second is a small theater to the left side of the Coconut Grove Playhouse for Joe Adler. Our plan includes a space for him. We really don't have any argument here about Joe Adler. Joe Adler is a fine director. We have a 200-seat theater to 225-seat black box theater right next to the preserved theater for him to use until he retires. On the other side, the most exciting part of this, I think, is the conservatory that we've designed. It's a 3-story building. The first story is for a Bahamian museum, the Bahamian Cuban museum, whatever we decide to do there. We're going to have a diverse board. We suggest a diverse board representing all of Miami-Dade County. Number 2, we would have a museum of the history of Coconut Grove. This is a great community. We've been here for over 100 years. There's a lot to see, a lot to do. There are tourists that come through here, local people that could use that. The second floor, though, is the most exciting. It's 6 studios that would be used by people for all the arts and for community activities. It would bring people down here 365 days a year. The current plan has that theater is active 30 weeks a year. And a lot of those are dark because they're doing rehearsal. How many people do you think that's going to attract down there by itself? Not many. What we really have is a little theater in the middle of a shopping center. I don't want any commercial activity down there. We don't have any in our plan. Everything is for the arts. It's to bring this community together. It's to include, and that's why we had people who were talking about the West Grove. Those people have been left out for 100 years. They've looked at the back of this. We think that we should have programs for everybody in Miami. People should be coming down here not because this is a great theater in the Grove, because it's a great theater in Miami. We're the only city in the United States that does not have an important regional theater. The only one. There are 75 around this country. We can afford to have an important regional theater in this country that brings down important stars. There was some testimony about Coconut Grove's condition before it ran into management problems and went bankrupt. From 1994 to 2004, they had a $1.3 million surplus. I've got the statistics right here in front of me that Mitch Less, who was their chairman of the board, compiled. Now, how are we going to pay for these 3 buildings? Oh, the 3rd floor is classrooms. It's a whole floor of classrooms. This is what I would call the liner for the garage. It's this conservatory. This is $42.5 million. Where did we get the figure? We had Skanska International that built the Science Museum, gave us an estimate of the cost of preserving history, this 100-year-old building we've been hearing about, the small theater, which is typical around the country, with a large theater, and this conservatory, $42.5 million. The city of Miami does not have to put any money into this in order for us to be able to afford this. This is a big city. We're supposed to be looking forward. We're a global city. We're a first-class, world-class city. We can't afford the $20 million. Okay, so where does the 42.5?
Yeah, because the time is up, but I have a feeling everyone up here is actually very curious.
I've been working on this for 5 years.
Where the additional $20 million
so I put $1 million in this last night. I believe in this. I put $2 million in this myself. I've already spent $1 million. I put another $1 million in it last night. I've got $2 more million in my pocket. We had 11 million. Some of those people walked away because this has taken so long. Why has this taken 13 years? It's not because of anything that I did. It's not anything that the people who support this did. But for $42.5 million, we can afford it. We have right now, including the form, we have the money to do this, and we can raise the rest through a capital campaign. I've raised over $100 million in the last 25 years in this community. Through the Adrian R. Center, we raise $6 million a year. I've been there for 10 years. That's 60. The Miami City Ballet, 9 years, $6 million a year. We have a $20 million budget now. We have 53 dancers. We are traveling now at the Kennedy Center. We went to London. We went to New York. We went to Paris. We can do that with this theater. We can create new theater that goes to Broadway. The La Jolla Theater, a little theater out there in San Diego, about the size of what we want to do here, had 6 plays on Broadway last year, 6 plays last year, bringing in money so that they can create and give jobs to people. This will create a large theater complex like this should be able to generate $25 million a year in economic activity for this community. It will pay for itself. This is an investment that you can make in the future for our people here. This is a 100-year decision. This is a magnificent piece of property. This is once in a lifetime opportunity. Let's go for it. Let's be a great city now. Let's be ambitious and do the right thing. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. No, please, everybody. Please.
John Nord, 3580 Royal Palm. I grew up here, 5th generation Miami. This is an historically significant building. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. The state of Florida asserts significant architectural elements are intact, and the facade is not a separate building. We don't want to amputate part of it. That's a quick timeline. The voters approved $20 million bond to restore the Coconut Grove Playhouse. The city's HEP Board designated the entire exterior in 2005, despite the misquotes that were heard earlier. I'd like to mention in passing the St. Stephen's Historic Chapel was demolished in 2012. It was 100 years old through some misunderstanding, shall I say. Then the county engaged Gable Stage to manage a 300-seat theater, reducing the seats by 73%. Then the 2017, the HEP Board granted certification of appropriateness to the county plan except for demolition. Except for demolition. And this is something that's been pushed forward with a misnomer. So therefore, we go to 2017. The 2 residents appealed the HEP decision. The city commission upheld the appeal, made substantial changes to the county plan. The appellate court dismissed the residents, and the county continued application of an erroneous DR. 2019, Department of Interior grants CGP designation on National Register of Historic Places, the entire exterior of the building. The city HEP Board in 2019 disapproves demolition of any of the exterior, upholding 2017 decision and upholding the 2005 decision, which is very clear, and anything to the contrary is not true. In 2019, the Playhouse entrance to the historic Bahamian district has been contemplated. Okay. Thank you very much. This is the actual statement the voters approved $20 million for in 2004, and I'll read it very slowly. The general obligation bond funds would complement other funding to reconstruct the Coconut Grove Playhouse, restore its structural integrity, and add to its performance and educational capabilities. It does not mention demolition, and that's what the voters voted for. And there's a problem here if it goes the other way against the voters. And the $20 million may still be out there, but thank you very much.
Commissioners, my name is Andy Parrish. I live at 3940 Main Highway in a 1909 restored house in Coconut Grove. I was the chair of the HEP Board on October 5th, 2005, when the board voted 8-0 to designate the entire exterior of the Playhouse as historic, which I shall prove by reading from the court reporter transcript of the board meeting, which you've just been handed for the record. The county's proposal is based on an erroneous designation report prepared by the then board consultant, Ellen Uguccione, who, at that public meeting, testified on page 5 of that transcript that she had made a critical mistake in the report. That mistake is why we are all here today. The designation report was never corrected, as it should have been, after the board's decision. And based on in that designation report, and based on Mrs. Uguccione's testimony, that's what the board based its vote. So I'm going to read just a short piece from that transcript on page 5. This is Ellen Uguccione testifying before the board as the board's outside consultant. She said, "I also was a bit chagrined at myself because at the end of the report, I made the statement that only the south and east facades are distinctive, which has led, I think, to people assuming that I am saying that only and the east-south facades are important, and therefore we don't need to worry about the building envelope itself. I want to make clear that my intent, why I wrote that, again, I'm not sure why, but my intent was certainly to include the entire building in the historic designation report." Then on page 36, Jerry Marston, who was also one of the board, it was a very, very good board. Tim Barber was on it, Jerry Marston. Mr. Marston says, "I just need to ask one question. Do we have anybody on this board who would like to speak as a champion for the notion of designating only the facades?" And Ms. Solero, one of the architects on the board, said no, and others joined in. And then finally, at the very end of the meeting, my vote was, and I prefaced it by saying, this is on page 70, my clear intention is to vote for the complete designation of the structure itself, of all sides of the structure. There was some discussion about the parking lot and everything. We had to include that because it was part of the folio. So, for 14 years, as your appointees, the HEP Board has done its duty and voted to save the entire exterior of the historic and iconic Playhouse. Just the exterior. Meanwhile, the county has refused to compromise 1 inch in its plan to demolish approximately 90% of this structure. And based on the evidence I just read into the record, it is high time for a compromise that restores and preserves the entire exterior of the historic Coconut Grove Playhouse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish.
Hello, my name is Melissa Meyer, 3161 Ohio Street. I am an AIA associate, a lead AP in building design and construction. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in architecture, and I have been an architectural designer and Coconut Grove resident for 25 years. As an adjunct professor at Miami-Dade College School of Architecture and Interior Design, I have taught architectural communications, theory of architecture, architectural materials and construction, and architectural design studios in which we utilize our local historic landmarks to inform the design process. In 2009, loose rules and intentionally misleading language led to the unnecessary demolition of St. Stephen's 1912 chapel that sat just 600 feet from our nationally designated historic playhouse. Parishioners and donors confirmed that loopholes and bad advice on how to obtain approvals for a demolition permit by intentionally obscuring the intent to demolish in the city's permit application process left the general public virtually unaware of the pending demolition. The entire tragedy was extensively documented in these Miami Herald articles by Andre Spiglucci and Beth Dunlop, in which George Hernandez, Arqitectonica's preservation architect, identifies and highlights the very gaps in the City Commission's demolition permit application process that he is helping the county and Arqitectonica exploit today. It was George's criticism of the city's project approval and demolition permit application process that led to this 2009 resolution by Miami-Dade County's own Historic Preservation Board, in which the county proclaims, and I quote, its strong opposition to the unnecessary destruction of Miami's most historic structures. This resolution vows to support a more ambitious system of educating our citizenry about the buildings that constitute the cultural, historic, and architectural legacy of this area and the rich history associated with it. Throughout the application process, in which public updates and notices regarding our historic playhouse, Arqitectonica and the county repeatedly misuse the terms rehabilitation, restoration, and preservation, while intentionally omitting the word demolition. The city's loose rules and gaps in the demolition permit application process may have been easy to exploit in 2009, but today, in 2019, social media is being used to get the truth out. That's why City Hall is full today. Coconut Grove is not falling for it this time, and Arqitectonica and the county have suddenly begun updating their project descriptions to include words like tear down and demolition. Comprised of crushed oolitic limestone and a lime-based cement, the concrete block that was used to build the playhouse in 1926 is larger, denser, and has a greater compressive strength than the block that is manufactured today. The Dade County pine floor joists and the roof trusses are as strong as concrete, and they are literally irreplaceable because Dade County pine is almost extinct. That's why Coral Gables Congregational Church, also designed by Keenel and Elliott, has lasted 97 years. That's why El Jardín, down the street from the Playhouse at Carrollton, also designed by Keenel and Elliott, has lasted 101 years. And that's why a fully restored playhouse will last beyond its approaching centennial anniversary, well beyond its approaching centennial anniversary, if you deny this appeal today. I have reviewed Arqitectonica's plans. The repurposed front facade, the only remnant of the original playhouse, which is a single building, not two, that I find in their design falls extremely short of the guidelines established by the National Park Service for restoration. The reuse of the double proscenium arch, Solomonic columns, fountain, and concrete grills would amount to mere shards, fragments, bits and pieces that have been torn from their original context, resulting in an ironic and mournful display of kitsch. Their proposed promenade and courtyard surrounded by retail space that Miami-Dade County is calling a compromise appears to be a recreation of Coco Walk, which had a design life of less than 25 years and has already been demolished. Appointed by you, the City Commission, because they possess the expertise and the special training required to make informed decisions, the members of the HEP Board have only two mandates: to promote the preservation of the city's heritage by identifying and designating properties of major significance and closely monitoring alterations to them. They have done their job. The HEP Board did not deny restoration, as stated in the county's appeal. They denied the demolition of our playhouse that is on the National Register of Historic Places. For our city government to function efficiently and effectively, you must allow the process to work. The mayor and city commission must not undermine those whom they themselves have appointed. Under your guidance and leadership, the demolished St. Stephen's 1912 chapel can be the sacrificial lamb that inspires us to uphold Miami-Dade County's 2009 resolution to oppose the unnecessary demolition of Miami's most historic landmarks. By denying this appeal, you can say no to loose rules and misleading language and set a new precedent, one that respects the rights of the voters and taxpayers of Miami-Dade County, and finally sets a good example for the next generation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Gloriana Calhoun. I'm a Coconut Grove resident. I live at 3665 Park Lane. And to clarify that there's no confusion, I'm going to read what Adjunct Professor of Architecture Melissa Meyer, and she states that there is no confusion about the 2004 voter mandate to use our tax dollars for complete restoration of our playhouse. There is no confusion about the 8-0 vote of the 2005 Historic and Environmental Preservation Boards to include the entire exterior of the Playhouse and to correct the erroneous designation report. There is no confusion about the unanimous vote by the State Historic Review Board to nominate our entire Playhouse, including the interior, for the National Register of Historic Places. And there is no confusion about the recent assertion by the state that the significant architectural elements within the historic theater are intact and in very good condition underneath removable layers of plywood, drywall, and plaster that were installed during the multiple renovations over the years, hence the unanimous vote. There is no confusion about the precise guidelines for complete restoration that are specifically outlined by the National Park Service for the restoration of the buildings that are on the National Register, such as our Coconut Grove Playhouse. And there is no confusion about our Playhouse being a single building and not two buildings. There is no confusion about the HEP Board's recent 6-4 vote against demolishing our Playhouse. There is no confusion about the inappropriateness of demolishing our historic Playhouse site and ignoring the gateway to Miami's first Bahamian community. There is no conclusion or no confusion about the state being responsible for the Playhouse property and its intent to preserve this precious historic cultural resource. There's just no confusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's Jennifer Howard, and I'm a licensed interior architect with a master's in architecture. We, the people, are here today to open the door of the Trojan horse that is rolling into our neighborhood, posing as a restoration and small theater project. If it wasn't for the bold block letters up there that remind you it's a playhouse, this would be a mall. Okay. This is a picture of their facade. You need to see up close the handling of the restoration, the missing pediments, the random medallion, the tacky white awnings. No thought whatsoever in the treatment of historic detail. This is not a firm who handles historic preservation. This is what a real historic preservation architect would do. This is what real restoration looks like. This is a building worthy to greet its visitors at the historic Charles Avenue and Main Avenue highways. A building to bridge cultures, not behead them. Their beheaded building and sloppy details will never be remembered. Okay. This is the Eitzen-Heisenbottel plan. The Eitzen-Heisenbottel plan has a 700-seat theater plus a 200-seat black box theater. They have approximately 8,500 square feet of supporting shops, etc., and storage. The county's plan has only a 300-seat black box theater with approximately 13,000 square feet of miscellaneous supporting spaces. You tell me what's going on here. For all the angry residents here to support the county, tell me, when was the last time a mall increased your property value? Look at the details here. These walls made of metal cages filled with rubble, probably from the demolished playhouse. The dark alley leading to the West Grove. Is this the welcoming arm? Friends, there is another plan. The thoughtful plan, the Eitzen-Heisenbottel plan. And we offer the Gables stage a real venue, not using them as a pawn to build a mall. Commissioners, you cannot keep purveying the Grove as an extraordinary place to be when you keep erasing all there is worth being. Your signatures will be indelibly written in history for the demolition of this building.
Thank you.
Notre Dame burned down. They are rebuilding it, and so can we. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Steve Massey, Miami native. I live in Abitar, across from the Playhouse. I'm here to summarize our group's presentation. Just coincidentally, I acted in the old Playhouse in the regional production of Child's Play. When I was in high school, I will say that it was 2 weeks and it was packed. And they were great memories, and the Playhouse, just personally for me, is part of my lifelong Miami and Coconut Grove experience. To sum up our positions, only the restoration of the entire building satisfies the voter mandate that was passed in the bond issue. The bond issue stated the Coconut Grove Playhouse was to be restored in its structural integrity and add to the performance and educational capabilities.
Just leaving a facade does not satisfy what the voters voted for. It's really clear, okay? So we think that there'll be potentially loss of money by not satisfying the state requirements on historic preservation. There's been testimony here that the building is structurally sound, just like the other buildings that were built at the same time with the same structural elements. The erroneous DR must be corrected to reflect the actual HEP vote. That was to restore the entire exterior of the Playhouse. And another note, if you look at what happened to South Beach, historic preservation and economic development go hand in hand. Not a facade as an excuse to build another mall. That's not what Coconut Grove needs. We need to bridge the cultural gap between the East and the West Groves. And we think the restoration of the entire Playhouse is the first step to do this. Congressman Wilson has said she sees a plan to integrate the multicultural aspects of the East and West Grove as essential to creating a unique new cultural experience. You can now create something unique in the United States by restoring the Playhouse, by not doing the old flim-flam that we've seen in the past. We can't bring back the old chapel. We can't bring back Jimmy Buffett's Coconut Grove drugstore, but we can restore the Playhouse. We can do this, and we can make something really unique. We can be an inviting thing to the West Grove and the East Grove, and it's our job, it's your job as a city. Your interests and our interests are not necessarily aligned with the county. That's why the city exists. That's why you guys exist.
Thank you,
here.
Mr. Massey.
So I urge you to approve the HEP Board designation, and let's restore the entire theater. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Alexis Snyder, Chief of Staff in the Office of the United States Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, and I'm here to read a letter on her behalf, and Quincy Cohen from our office has yielded his 2 minutes to me. I'd like to read her letter. Chairman Russell and City of Miami Commission, I write to you regarding the pending plans to renovate the historic Coconut Grove Playhouse. In an effort to move forward towards reaching a compromise, I've communicated with representatives from both sides of this issue, hoping to reach an agreement beneficial to everyone, particularly to the Bahamian American community. Unfortunately, as of today, that compromise has not been achieved. Additionally, I sincerely regret that the proposed development plans in its current state will likely result in the Coconut Grove Playhouse losing its National Register designation, which is so rare and should be coveted. This will be a tremendous loss to the Coconut Grove community, the city of Miami, and the state of Florida. Unfortunately, however, the necessary funding stream is currently out of reach of the parties negotiating to preserve the historic structure and designation. I am encouraged, however, to say that I am moving forward with both the City of Miami and Miami-Dade County to make my quest for Bahamian inclusion a reality. Thank you, Commissioner Russell, for your willingness to provide the Bahamian Heritage Initiative, Miami-Dade County, and the Coconut Grove Playhouse Foundation with the much-needed deferral to consider the importance of including Bahamian history and culture in this project. Thank you, Commissioner Gord, for your input and for hearing our cry. Thank you also, Mayor Jimenez, for accommodating our small request to include the Bahamian Cultural Arts Center within the Coconut Grove Playhouse Development Plan and our larger request for the museum and the Bahamian Village. We all know the history of Miami and the important role Bahamians played in the establishment and founding of Miami. My grandparents were an integral part of the first Bahamian settlers in Miami and Coconut Grove. I owe it to them and all of the Bahamian diaspora to preserve their legacy and heritage and to tell their story to our children and generations yet unborn. As chairperson of the Bahamian Heritage Initiative, I look forward to working with you in achieving the goals envisioned. Sincerely, Frederica S. Wilson, Member of Congress. And I'd like to yield the rest of my time, which is probably about 2 minutes, to Rowena Portier Sutherland, who is the Director of Culture for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the founder of the Bahamas Artist Movement.
Maria Freed. I'm here as a private citizen. I own several residences in Coconut Grove. My main residence is 3055 Washington Street, Coconut Grove, Florida, 33133. And I'm here to remind you that the county's plan is not restoration. The county plan violates the Secretary of Historic guidelines for historic properties. The Dade County plan foregoes $2 million in special category grants. Those simply won't be available. And other local, state, and federal historic funds will not be available for construction or into the future. The demolition, most of it, does alter the designation of this building. I have here that I'd like to share with the commissioners a letter from the Florida Department of State written by Jason Aldridge, Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, in which he highlights some of the deficiencies and some of the outcomes of this decision. So I'd like to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You must be asking, what is the point? Well, the point is that the county's plan does not and will not work. With all your due respect, Mayor Jimenez, the county's plan is a selfish plan with no inclusion, no multilingual, nor multicultural concept. It does not unify cultures. And most of all, it is not restoration. It's demolition. It is destruction. Anything but theater. Retail, garage, restaurants, condo, a breezeway. Oh yes, and a 300-seat theater, just because the contract with the state requires it. Well, that is not the legacy of the Coconut Grove Playhouse. You know, as an actor, producer, Spanish TV host, and artistic director for the past 45 years, and having worked at the Coconut Grove Playhouse with the marvelous Jose Ferrer, I can assure you that there's an alternative plan, a feasible plan, with a magnificent concept, and that would be the Coconut Grove Foundation, the Edson Heisenbottle Center for the Arts, a full cultural experience, making it once again our beloved Coconut Grove Playhouse a true and magnificent cultural center, good for all of us.
Thank you very much.
And not just a few.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hello.
Commissioners, my name is Jeffrey Poitier. I am from Nassau, Bahamas. I'm here to represent the Poitier family, both in the Bahamas and in Coconut Grove, and the national community of actors. My family's relationship with Coconut Grove Playhouse began in 1913, when my grandfather, Reginald Poitier's cousin, James Poitier Sr., moved from Cat Island, Bahamas to Coconut Grove. According to his granddaughter, Evelyn, James Poitier Sr. was a laborer, like many Bahamian men of his generation. He was involved with the original construction of the Playhouse. His granddaughter, who still lives in the house at 3738 Oak Street, said that her father, James Poitier Jr., along with others, built the churches and many houses that still stand today in Coconut Grove and Coral Gables. The significance of the Playhouse in the history of Coconut Grove is unsurpassed. Built in 1927, it had successful seasonal runs for nearly 100 years. The Playhouse hosted the most notable theatrical performers and productions over the decades, including the world premiere showing of Tennessee Williams' Sweet Bird of Youth, the U.S. premiere of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, and even the taping of The Late Show starring David Letterman. This historic facility was recognized by the National Register of Historic Places, and the state of Florida indicates that the significant historical elements are intact and that the facade is not a separate building. In 2006, the Playhouse closed its doors, a victim of poor governance and oversight. Today, the Playhouse Foundation stands ready to return the Playhouse to its past glory. The foundation consists of a diverse group of local residents, arts patrons, preservationists, and community activists who are committed to restoring the historic Coconut Grove Playhouse to its past greatness and putting it back on the national theatrical map. The foundation consists of a diverse group of local residents, arts patrons, preservationists, and community activists who are committed to restoring the historic Coconut Grove Playhouse to its past greatness and putting it back on the national theatrical map. To that end, Dr. John Nort, along with Corky Dozier and other concerned citizens, contacted me to help in their preservation efforts for the Playhouse. I then contacted several influential people, such as actors Philip Michael Thomas, Bill Cobbs, Robert Duvall, and Tony Award-winning Broadway actor Tony Chisholm, who have generously agreed to support me in the preservation effort. In addition, I contacted Rowena Poitier, who is the Director of Culture for the Bahamas government, to travel to the U.S. to represent the Bahamian people's interest in preserving this historic Coconut Grove Playhouse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Not yet. Good afternoon, Commissioner Chair, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Cornelia Corky Dozier. I celebrate 50 years as a professional performing and visual as well as media artist, as well as an entrepreneur. I am very proud indeed to have served as a consultant for the NEA, as well as the State of Florida Department of Cultural Affairs for the vital State Theaters Exchange and Network, particularly looking at strategies in diversity and inclusion. Just recently, Congress amended the National Historic Preservation Act in 2016. And it amended it with an area that's very important indeed. When we talk about our community of Miami, they amended because of inclusion, diversity. The preservation movement is deeply committed to telling the full story of our nation's history and seeks to identify, acknowledge, and protect previously undervalued places and underrepresented communities in order to capture the full breadth and diversity of our nation. Historic preservation has demonstrated an unparalleled capacity to realize and revitalize cities, neighborhoods, communities, foster vibrant economic and social activity, and generate jobs and spur tourism. Historic preservation is more than brick and mortar. That's an important thought, because we need to pay attention to cultural significance. This is about people. This is about the use of properties, the use of land. It's not just about buildings. The human element is crucial. I remember serving as the chairman of community support for the Performing Arts Center. And during that time, I must say that I have yielded time from Mr. Richard Fendelman and yielded...
yes, we have it on the record.
Okay.
We still have 3 minutes and 30 seconds left.
And during that time, as chairman of community support, we talked about existing facilities, that before we built the Performing Arts Center that we have downtown, that we would talk about existing facilities. Well, the Coconut Grove Playhouse is an existing facility. Existing facilities are wonderful because it gives you the opportunity to create regional opportunities for actors and musicians and performers to create local talent opportunities, and through their works to tell the stories of their communities that they live in. That's the most important aspect. The Coconut Grove Playhouse stands as a cultural hub for the creative residents of Coconut Grove and the world. It's been a cultural tourism destination with a dynamic, diverse community energized through a creative spirit, abundant in creative economic opportunity and infused with passion for the arts. The Playhouse sits in the center of the first Bahamian settlement in the South Florida mainland. To the east, by the water, white Bahamians, the Beasleys, developed their property, which is now known as the Barnacle. To the west, on the other side of Main Highway, other white Bahamians, like William Froh and E.W. Stirrup, an African-American Bahamian, developed properties. The Coconut Grove Playhouse sits on property that was once owned by E.W. Stirrup. The Coconut Grove Playhouse was built by Bahamians in that community, who lived, by the way, in the Black Bahamian Gateway workforce community adjacent to the theater on Charles Avenue. When I came here from Broadway as a lead in Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope to the Coconut Grove Playhouse, I also came as an actors' equity representative for the union and found out very quickly that the Black talent that we had that had come from Broadway from a professional perspective was not being welcomed. They could not stay in hotels. They were not to be served in restaurants. And with that in mind, I approached then Mr. Bob Fishko and said, is there a discrimination action that we should take? And he said, what can we do? And I came to you. Many of you were a part of that time and experience when I came. I came to the commission for the city of Miami, and led by Bahamian American Commissioner Reverend Theodore Gibson, the Coconut Grove Playhouse became the first theater to be integrated. How wonderful to see that time, because that integration led multicultural theater experiences, not African American, but Hispanic American experiences, Asian American experiences. So many were brought to the theater. But most importantly, new audiences, new consumers came to the theater. The idea of working with the Coconut Grove Playhouse Foundation is one that I embrace because the Coconut Grove Playhouse is my home. From the Playhouse, I created the Coconut Grove Children's Theater, a 3-time Emmy Award-winning Corporation for Public Broadcasting, best children's theater in the United States entity.
Thank you, Corky.
And with that in mind, I look to work with our community to develop this vision as a performing arts center rooted in culture and creativity. And
Anthony Vinciguerra from 3325 Charles Avenue. I live just a little bit over 400 feet from the Playhouse, and I know we all care about it. It's going to affect us right next to the Playhouse immediately. But something, as a resident of the West Grove for the last 15 years, watching the loss of the historic Bahamian community in the West Grove, the architecture, the culture, the people, has been incredibly sad for me. As a white guy moving to the West Grove, I was very cognizant of where I was moving and so honored to live in a historic community like that. And it's been incredibly sad to see that lost. So I think the words that have been said about connecting the Playhouse to the West Grove and supporting the Payment community are incredibly important. But I also understand that the issue you're voting on is really whether or not the county plan respects the historic integrity of the Playhouse. And it's clear the HEP Board says it doesn't. The state of Florida says it doesn't. I know my home, which is a historically designated house, if I asked to have 3/4 of it demolished, our friends at the city would say, no way, because it's no longer a historic building. So it's pretty clear. I know that's the issue really being voted on today, so I ask you not to grant the appeal because it simply is not historic preservation. The HEP Board, for those of us that were here at the meeting, asked the county and Arqitectonica to go back and just come up with another plan that respects the integrity of this historic building. And I don't think that's too much to ask any of us. But thank you so much.